Mhm.
Welcome back to another wonderful day of Otessa Online 2026. I'm here with the great pleasure of having to introduce Dr. Marty Cleveland Innes, who will be giving us a talk on higher education transformation and lifelong learning. Um, uh, Marty is a professor of open digital and distance education at Athabasca University. She's editor-in-chief of the Canadian Journal of Learning and Technology and vice president of the Canadian Network for Innovation in Education. So I really appreciate you creating the time to come and share it with us today and look forward to your session. So um, thank you so much. I'll turn that over to you now.
Thank you so much, Val. It's great to see you. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement and invite you all to post your land acknowledgement in the chat if you so desire. I acknowledge that I live and work in Treaty 7 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Kenai, Piikani, Siksika, as well as Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda First Nations. I acknowledge that many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who have lived on and cared for these lands for generations. So I'm so thankful to have this opportunity to talk to this group today. I want to share with you what education transformation might look like when viewed through the eyes of international experts in education, those who design, lead, and research learning systems every day. Some background on me, I actually studied the sociology of education at the University of Calgary, where my strong views about high quality education emerged. You see, without high quality education, there is no well-developed citizenry, and in turn, what results is a challenged society. So my commitment to open and distance learning is actually rooted in this perspective that education must be accessible, affordable, and of high quality for everyone, anywhere, in order for the end user, the ultimate end user of what it is we do with the many technological emergences and even AI. At the end of the day, it will be how we survive in our societies that is the ultimate test of whether it's a good idea or not. So, in this brief time we have together today, I want to pose questions about the direction of higher education change and share some recent research and then hear your perspective. Higher ed innovation has evolved from a superficial thought exercise into an institutional mission and a driver of pro-social activities. At the same time, learning throughout the lifespan or lifelong learning has become a central requirement for many adult and professional requirements and ultimate successes. So, the study that I want to tell you about is part of a continuous quest with my research group to support higher education change in the direction of this new important requirement around continuous lifelong learning across the lifespan. Can you give me the next slide, please, Katie? So let's think about the context for a sec. I'm going to quote a message that we received from George Siemens at a conference in Dublin in 2019. He said, so many of us, including this group here today, have seen in-person classrooms be transformed as laptops made their appearance in the classroom. We had to reconfigure the desks for electrical outlets and Ethernet ports. Remember those days? And immovable desks. So what George was saying, that new tool changes mean that our practices have to change. And he suggested it was in subtle ways. I'm going to say maybe not. That the way we must change might feel innocuous, but it signals ways in which we will need to bend our behavior. Now, do we bend that behavior to the technologies, or are we going to guard against being technified? That's George's word. Our actions and behaviors can become those afforded by the technology, and then the social systems needed to make the technology work. Or, in fact, although this continues now, maybe we're missing something. What are we missing if we use technified by technology, and maybe terrified as a lens through which we assess the needs of a new higher education? What are we doing? So did you know, you likely do know, that there are new groups of educators forming in reaction to the emergence of AI, which has been significantly disruptive. One is called Offline. That's a group seeking to roll back our embracing of technology in education. And another for those who are anti-digital, suggesting a return to in-person engagement in courses based on printed textbooks. Remember those days? Well, I'm not ready to join one of these groups, but I am observing with interest and seeking to understand how such trends get started, what leadership approaches are at play, and what policies and practices are emerging. I carry in my head the oversimplified framework about how humans improve their lives. So I was a research assistant for a demographer while I was in graduate school. And one of his projects was an attempt to verify what was the story about how people gain status in Western industrialized countries and what impacts status change or social mobility. Well, what we discovered is that status attainment and social mobility are significantly affected by three things. The first is the country in which you were born and how functional that country and their societies are. The second is the family in which you were born. And the final one is your access to education. So these standard determinants discussed across textbooks and research on social stratification and mobility are still at play. It's really interesting. If you want to read more about this, you can look at Max Weber's work on life chances or Blau and Duncan on social stratification. So let's scroll ahead from when George was talking in 2019, and let's look beyond the Western world. What if it's not access to technology or digital literacy that improves life chances? What if it's learning literacy and the experience and development that comes from being taught, and those extensive developmental learning experiences? So next slide, please, Katie. So I've spent 25 years as an academic at Athabasca University. Thanks to my colleague, Dr. Terry Anderson, I also spent 12 of those years as a part-time on-loan guest professor at two Swedish universities, where my views on higher education innovation particularly evolved. Why is that? Sweden, Sweden has a very dedicated commitment to education, but they're also a very northern country and have a high commitment to remote and rural. So with colleagues there, we completed a modified Delphi expert consultation process with international education scholars from 4 different continents. Our overarching research question was, what parts of higher education must be reconfigured to become a flexible, connected, inclusive, and ethically grounded ecosystem capable of supporting lifelong learning and contributing to a world worth living in? We collected data in 4 stages. The first was a scoping literature review to explore the chosen topic, which we then selected a few and sent them out to our expert panel. Next, we sent out a questionnaire to the experts based on the information found in the scoping review, asking them how they reacted to what was being suggested in the thought pieces and the empirical studies. Then email interviews were sent to dig deeper into the answers from the survey. And finally, we did focus group interviews with questions based on the results. We used a grounded theory approach to analyze this reams of data that we had. And the results that I want to share, a portion of the results I want to share with you, emerged from the confirmatory coding process. We spent a lot of hours on this project. It was like spinning wheat into gold. Can I have the next slide, please, Katie? So we ended up with 9 confirmed codes. None of these are going to be a big surprise to you. What emerged is shaped into 3 layers, but let me quickly run through the labels: accessibility, digital literacy, EDI, equity, diversity, and inclusion. The 4th was multimodal delivery, then leadership, financial issues, organization and quality, infrastructure, and pedagogical change. Across 107 in-depth responses, 3 themes emerged as the priority drivers of transformation: pedagogical change, leadership, and accessibility. Although that, we have to be linear in some ways to present ideas, the most important insight we got from talking to these people and identifying these themes is that they don't operate independently. Like, the permutations and combinations are daunting. However, this does have to be seen as something that is integrated. And while we're finite beings and we can only take so much at a time, we do have to consider every time we make a decision and take a step, we have to think about what else is being affected when we do so. So these themes that we've come up with are clearly interdependent, mutually reinforcing, and often co-present in the same experience or challenge. Not often, I am close to always. So the interdependence is visible in the data responses, and we were allowed to code themes with more than one code, obviously. So pedagogical change and leadership appeared together in a significant way, and accessibility was heavily affected as a causative factor in discussing it by EDI and, of course, multimodal delivery. So all that this tells us that transformation is not a set of isolated initiatives. It's a systematic reconfiguration of how we design, deliver, and lead learning. I understand that your conference has been, if I may, heavily weighted toward discussions around AI. That's understandable. What worries me a little is the overwhelming attention there that then is not being spent on a lot of other things that still need our attention, our research, our functional change. So I just want to go over a few of these. Accessibility. From the perspective of our experts, accessibility is no longer a compliance issue. It's a design principle. Our experts emphasize that accessible systems enable lifelong learning by removing structural, technological, and pedagogical barriers. You know, I'm from Athabasca University, and has been our mantra for decades. And it's that phrase, the removal of barriers. Accessibility intersects strongly with multimodal delivery and EDI, as I just said, reinforcing that access is technological and cultural, and it takes a commitment to consider those things. But I would add that removing barriers also provides a flexibility that can support a level of learner independence, so important to are the speakers of earlier times, Stephen Brookfield and Randy Garrison. Flexibility as a key to managing diverse learners and their learning approaches, needs, accessibilities, and so on. And as learning unfolds over the lifespan. Digital literacy is foundational for learners and educators, but it's not simply tool proficiency. It's the ability to navigate digital ecosystems, evaluate information, and participate meaningfully in digitally mediated learning environments. What about EDI, which I would suggest needs a lot of attention right now, particularly given the amount of backlash that we see? EDI emerged as a cultural and discursive imperative, shaping the narrative around inclusive pedagogy. It influences how institutions communicate values, design learning environments, and support diverse learners. Multimodal, I think of Val when I hear this term, is now a structural expectation. It enables flexibility, supports diverse learners, and expands the reach of higher education. Participants in our expert panel linked multimodality closely with a lot of other things, but particularly accessibility, because modality choice is a form of access. And who makes that choice? Is it those of us who are doing the design? Is it the learners? Is it a collaborative decision-making process? Leadership. Leadership is the connective tissue of transformation. Our experts describe leadership as relational, distributed, and oriented toward capacity building. Leadership intersects with pedagogical change because leaders shape the conditions under which innovation becomes possible. Pedagogical change, and I didn't manifest this. It really did come up as the thing that that acted as a driver around a lot of other things that were happening. So pedagogical change, which was defined as the processes of teaching and learning and the roles that students and teachers, instructors play in the process, um, was what was most frequently discussed and most deeply interconnected. It is the change agent that activates all the other things. Participants describe pedagogical change as a shift toward intentional curriculum, intentional teaching and learning, beyond content, supported by digital tools, requiring core competencies. The change should be in the direction of learner-centered design and moving from, are we still saying this? On the teacher focus to the learner activities and not just content, but the whole person. We need self-directed and self-determined learning on the edges of doing what has to be done to meet the curriculum requirements. Pedagogy should be applied, adaptive, and based on real-world learning. That whole person who's got to survive in what we hope will be a world worth living in. Community engagement and socially responsive pedagogies, meaning we're not just doing content. We cannot do just content. And it's funny how if something like AI shows up, we're working on all the edges of content to help focus the learners on development of those, and the teachers, the development on those skills around AI. So we're happy to move beyond content for things that are shiny and new. But we have been in the hidden curriculum with less explicit understanding, been working on the development of that individual all along. Learning how to communicate properly in a classroom, learning how to write an essay of argument, and on and on. So we landed on a central argument. Pedagogical change is not a response to adding technology. It's about redesigning learning around human development, agency, and adaptability. The balance between digital innovation and humanizing pedagogy is actually the fulcrum of the transformation that we're currently in. And that was something, this is not just what I fully embrace, which I do, but it is what the people around us from all over the globe were talking to us, were suggesting in their discussions with us. So there's innovation, there's lifelong learning, and there's also faculty development. Participants noted that innovation has shifted from peripheral activity to an institutional mission. Lifelong learning is now a purposeful construct for professional maintenance of competence and success. So, a key insight from the study was also that teachers, instructors, faculty, teaching and learning skills mediate the relationship between this innovation and lifelong learning. They suggested that innovation doesn't automatically produce lifelong learning or anything else. It's the pedagogical capacity of the designers, the leaders, the faculty, the teachers and instructors that translate innovation into meaningful opportunities for the learners who are running through our factory of activities. Professional development must therefore be a continuous, relational, and grounded reality for those who are working in our higher education institutions. So I'll say as an aside, this aligns with contemporary research on reciprocal determinism and dialectical relationism. Pedagogy, identity, and environment co-evolve. Educators' self-efficacy and identity shift as they engage with AI-supported design practices within an evolving institutional ecosystem. So I'll say again, pedagogical change is not about adding technology. It's about redesigning learning around human development, agency, and adaptability. The balance between digital innovation and we have AI and we're going to use it and we're going to deal with whatever concerns we have that may affect our education ecosystem, but we're going to do that with a humanizing pedagogy that's the fulcrum of transformation if we want to contribute to a world worth living in. So now it's your turn. Next slide, Katie. We have a set of recommendations that we're going to make based on this research in the writing that we're doing. And I would love to hear what you think about how this might unfold and affect our current contexts in education. So I think there's seven, I have seven premises that I want to offer you to respond to. We're going to do it as polling, but I would really like to hear your responses as well. We might not get to cover all of them and discuss them, but Katie's going to put up the polling for you, and then we'll have a chance for each one briefly to discuss.
I think, Marty, we can end the poll and then see the results because I think almost everyone must have already entered their response.
Okay, I can see the results, but maybe the rest can't. Right now, we have 40% strongly agree, 50% agree, and 10% not sure.
Should we end the poll?
Yes.
So I just shared the results, so everyone should be able to see it now.
Okay. So how have you been doing this at Otessa? Do people put their hands up? Do they grab the mic?
I think it might be just easier if people went ahead and, just turn their mic on.
Okay, I invite you to comment or ask questions. You can even talk about AI. Okay, well, I have lots more questions for you. So let's go to the second request. So the second request says pedagogical change is the engine. That's a tough one. Um,
Should we go ahead and end the poll?
Last call. So of course, when we say pedagogical change is the engine, we mean the 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 most significant driving factor to become to take us to not only a sound, meaningful learning environment, but um, a place such that the end user of our education practices, which is the societies in which our learners live, will also be served by what we do if how we deal with those individuals is meaningful, is personalized, is engaging, and teaches things like tolerance and collaboration and support. So we have 33% who strongly agree, 22% who agree, oh, and 44% who are not sure.
So
Oh,
there's a comment,
absolutely.
Marty, in the chat from Mel Young, and
Hi.
I like what you have here. However, without changes systematically from the K to 12 sector too, we fight an uphill battle once we get students in higher education to change the way they engage in learners, placing value on learning, etc. And Mel added also, not to discount what K to 12 teachers are doing to try and place value on learning, but they have pressures that they are also fighting, and they're facing burnout too.
Thank you, Mel. And point well taken. Can I ask you this? Do you think that's new? That transition into higher education from K to 12 has been a significant challenge for some time. This may make it more so. And so I pose that as a question for you to consider. Of course, I'd love to hear your answer, but I would also say that the community of inquiry pedagogical model, which encourages, supports, and teaches higher levels of self-direction and engagement than we've had previously in higher education. And lots of people are doing it in K to 12 as well, where the learner actually participates in the development of their own learning experience, not outside the curriculum. Yes, we have to do what's required of us, but the learners get to help develop their experiences so that they play a role in making them the most meaningful for them. Go ahead, Mel.
Hi, thanks for the feedback, Marty. I just put my stuff in the chat because no one else was really talking, but I think that ideally, as a person who came from the K to 12 system, I really wanted and valued my students wanting to learn, wanting to read, wanting to do math, and intrinsically being motivated to learn. But I can tell you that the pressures that teachers are facing, plus from not just from administration, but from parents, from the government, performance on EQAO, that most students now are doing worksheets. As I have kids in elementary school that they don't do like play-based learning is a thing of the past. And maybe that's just in my city where I am. But most of the parents are talking about students doing worksheets, the fun is being taken out of school, and the value on learning is not there. So already students in elementary school don't want to go to school. They don't like learning. So I think that like if we're looking at valuing the learner, this has to be a sector change from K to 12 through higher education. And there's always been a disconnect, what's happening at K to 12 versus what we do in higher ed. And I
Right.
think that we just need more cohesion there. And we need a government that can strategically drive that direction because they're the ones that kind of put the check boxes where they need to be. I could talk all day about this, but I'll let you continue, Marty.
Oh, thank you so much, Mel. And yes, I imagine an air hug for you. I can't, everybody I teach is a teacher somewhere, um, is or a principal or dealing with this, no question. I um well, I want to be careful here because we don't want to get into a discussion about politics. But yes, we absolutely need people in the government making decisions for us in education who actually have some expertise. So I applaud what you're saying. I hope that in higher ed, where we have a little more latitude, we can we can have some level of a rescue mission while we're waiting for those other things to be sorted out. I really want to ask what city you're in, but I'm not going to. I can tell you the teachers in Alberta, where I am, are having a terrible time. But the commitment still from a vast group of them to make it better is still there. So I'm hopeful. But now we've laid AI on them as well to say, oh, here, figure this out now as well. How's this going to help? How's it going to hurt? Um, and it's big challenges. So Katie, let's go to the next suggestion that leadership, um, well, that power and authority should be shared. I guess that's really the notion that we came up with. Again, Mel, harder in K to 12 because there's a lot more bureaucracy around what you're allowed to do when you're teaching still children in especially in elementary school. However, we've created a complexity that's very difficult to handle, and one person will never have all the right answers or all the ways out. Okay, so we have 50% at strongly agree, 33% at agree, and 17% at not sure. The last call before we close it. Well, I teach the leadership course in our doctoral program. And one of the things that is a critical discussion for us is followership as well as leadership, because being a leader now is is an impossible job. And we're finding in higher ed, you probably have heard this as well, that people are not putting their hands up to be presidents of universities, to be provosts, vice president, academic, and so on. So I don't know what it's like in K to 12. Who would want to be a principal right now? So um, I think we need some new ways of looking at leadership. If we aren't going to collaborate, we're going to have a lot more trouble trying to get through this. Stephen, put your hand up. We could use your approach to running higher education. Um, okay, any change here? Well, we've got a strong agree, uh, 43 and 43 on strongly agree, and only 14% not sure. So let's go to the next one. Katie, and I'll see this might have to be the last one, given our time constraints. Accessibility must be systemic. Good point. Stephen, what do you think it means?
Sorry, just had to find my audio button. Um, if I had to guess, I would say applied to everybody across the system, but I'm genuinely not sure of what the intent is here.
Okay, so thank you for the question. What we saw in the responses from our Delphi experts was that accessibility is also a driver and that it has to be embraced as an idea at all levels by with all of the other things that we're working on. So integrated maybe would have been a different word. Connected, systemic, meaning that it's system wide, not something that's just spoken about in policy. It doesn't refer just to open admission, but rather it refers to an accessible pedagogy, no matter who you are or what your learning benefits or challenges, competency may be. So we've got a pretty high agreement on accessibility as something that's within the system and operating at all levels. 89%. No, we've got full agreement on that one. So let me ask how we're doing for time, Val, and if you want us to continue to the last three or open the floor.
Our next session's 10 o'clock, and we like to encourage about 10-minute break first, but we can go a bit over. It's only 9:43 or 45 right now. So 5-7 minutes, 10 minutes.
Okay. Let me say the last things I wanted to say here. Thank you all for participating. The other themes that we're looking at by way of recommendations is that technology, whatever it is, however we're going to use it, must humanize learning, and that lifelong learning is a particularly strong outcome. Okay, thank you for your time. So I want to finish by saying higher education transformation, it's not a future aspiration, it's an active, ongoing reconfiguration of our learning ecosystem. And maybe what we can do in higher education is shape the training that we offer through our teacher education programs and our support for administrators in K to 12 to take another look at how we can integrate, systematize, to Mel's points, what's going on so that it's a smoother transition from one level of learning to another. The themes identified in our study provide a conceptual map, but not a lot of prescriptions. Those have to be contextualized. We still feel like the engine of change is pedagogical, how we design learning, how we support learners, how we cultivate educators capable of leading in this crazy complexity that we've created. At the end of the day, our experts said, look, transformation is possible, but only when we have leadership that takes seriously the ways in which we're teaching our learners, which is pedagogical, and that we are accessible to all our diverse learners and inclusive in many ways. The other thing that comes up, it's part of the adult education movement anyway, and certainly something that's important as you move into workplace learning, and that's that underpinning a lot of this discussion is this notion that we have to have humans working together. So I believe we're on the second last slide. Katie, slide 6. If you could move to that, please. This is an inspiring quote that I wanted to share with you, that the intersection of online, I'll say digital education, humanizing teaching approaches, and the use of AI and digital tools to humanize learning represents a transformative opportunity for the education landscape. By leveraging digital tools to support and enhance humanizing strategies, educators can create more effective, engaging, and personalized learning experiences. However, it's crucial to maintain a balance between technological advancements and human-centric approaches to ensure that education remains a deeply personal and impactful experience. So that's Razak and colleagues who wrote that and had it published last year. So I would add to that that through this deeply personal and impactful experience, learning can ultimately become a lifestyle, assuming we can also get to that problem of destroying our K to 12 students' learning experiences. That if we can't change that, means we're going to be on a rescue mission in higher education. So my very last slide is a tribute to my colleagues and my research assistant. I have 3 wonderful colleagues in Sweden that, although I'm not assigned as a guest professor anymore, we're still working together. And so I want to make sure I give tribute to them. Dr. Lundquist, Dr. Jaldemark, and Dr. Mazilius, and our wonderful research assistant, Carmen Jensen Tem. Thank you all very much for the time with you today.
Thank you so much, Marti. We super appreciate you sharing your findings and your wisdom. Katie, I think if we can stop the recording.